Hi, everyone. My name's Dennis Mink. We're here today with Félix Boudreaux. Felix, welcome to the OG House, not a podcast, but welcome. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Dennis. Nice to talk with you today.
Yeah. We have I got a number of questions for you. Would like to kind of kind of dig into your experience. You're currently at Pok Pok, but maybe why don't we start? You can just tell me a little bit about you and your background.
Yeah, of course. So I basically started my career as a journalist in a time where all the newspapers were going bankrupt. So like that was my my start, and I quickly shifted to app growth when I discovered that's something that existed. So I've been doing that for about 10 years now. I was head of marketing for a product called Better Sleep, which was all about helping people sleep better, like the name says. So I was heading the marketing and content effort there, and we were able to scale a Better Sleep pretty big. It was in the 10 biggest app in health and fitness, so that was a big success. Then it got sold to Teladoc, which is a telemedicine company in the US. That's when I joined Pok Pok. That was about 3 years ago. So I'm the VP of growth and marketing there. Pok Pok is an app for kids 2 to 8, an educational app, and we've seen a really good growth there. So we're in the top 10 most top grossing kids app right now in the US. And it's been a really fun ride.
Right on. I just need to ask, so the pivot from journalism to growth and marketing, how do you do that? How do you make that pivot?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that are useful in being a journalist that are useful in growing an app. And one of them is just knowing like how what people care about and what people like to talk about. In order to sell an app, you have to have an interesting story and you have to have an interesting pitch. So that kind of like connected with what I was doing as a journalist. And also, I had a bit of success with PR in my various companies, both at Pok Pok and at Better Sleep. So, like pitching to journalists, like knowing what is interesting to them and being really realistic about what journalists care about these days because they're very busy. There's not that many. So, you need to have a really good pitch and they won't care about everything. They won't care about a little release that your app is doing. It needs to be something major, or at least you need to spin it in a way that feels very big.
Yeah, but one day I want to go deeper into this because that is and you don't just go from journalism to marketing overnight, let alone app marketing or growth. That is not an overnight. No one's going to hire your journalist to, hey, come and run marketing for my app. Doesn't happen. But we'll save that for another time. So you mentioned that you led growth for various products, including Pok Pok for Kids, where you're currently at, Better Sleep for Adults, and I also saw Watch Mojo for content. Do you have can you tell me what kind of framework for just discovering those like early stage growth opportunities do you have, regardless of vertical?
Yeah, I think a lot of that doesn't really change by product. I think a lot of that is just really understanding what who your target audience is and kind of like talking to them, understanding the initial problem and more like falling in love with the problem basically. So like in any of those companies, it has been talking to the users a lot, just getting that really qualitative feedback. And also the other part of it is just really digging to the data. So when I join a company, I like to go really deep in the data, finding patterns, and then based on that, establishing a roadmap and just establishing what are the low hanging fruits based on the data, based on the conversation, kind of start working at that. And on the other end, that's more from the product growth standpoint. And on the other end is the UA, the UA growth loop. So like what have we done so far? What has worked? What have we not explored yet? What are the competition doing? And based on that, again, like starting small, trying to identify if there's anything there and just establishing a really fast pace of experiment has been what has worked best at any companies I've been at, not being afraid to challenge the status quo, experimenting really quickly. As long as you have confidence is those in those experiment results. So like that's the faster you want to go. If you lose that, then there's just no point experimenting. And yeah, so like usually talking to user, understanding the problem and experimenting fast, if you do it in a right way, will lead you to success. Otherwise, perhaps your solution is just not good for the problem, or the problem is not big enough or present enough to be monetized well.
Yeah, it's almost like you need to have an entrepreneurial mindset, and approach, which is, I think, exactly what you're talking about.
I think so, especially if you join a young company. I think the biggest mistake is to fall in love with the solution you have in place when you join, because there's a lot of chance that is not perfect. Like you've come up with your MVP or like a first product, but is it the optimal way, the most optimal way to fix that problem? It's unlikely. Like it's probably solving part of it, but you have to be able to be very frank about what you're doing and pivot really quickly to be able to really get the best solution for that problem quickly. So it does require kind of like at least like an entrepreneurial mindset to get there.
So at Hypnos, is that, am I pronouncing it correctly? Hypnos.
Yes, yes,
My
correct.
understanding, while you were there, you managed over 70 contributors and freelancers. That's a lot. I'm really curious, like, what you had them producing, what exactly were they producing, and help me understand, like, what was your process to ensuring like creative consistency and quality and velocity when managing so many people and distributed, is my understanding.
Yeah, like that was an interesting challenge. So when I was there, I was in charge of both marketing and content. And the content for this particular app was all about like audio content that would help people sleep better. So you can think about soothing music, soothing sound, meditation, bedtime story was really big. So for that, you needed a lot of writers, you needed a lot of voice actors, you needed musicians, and that was only in English, but then we were present, I think, in 6 or 7 languages. So then you needed translators and needed like Japanese voice actors and so on and so forth. So that grew the team pretty quickly and pretty big. And we did develop like a couple things to keep consistency and also to be fast, to move really quickly in those markets. So basically, like what was helping us is have a really solid brand book that would kind of align all the people we would be working with pretty quickly in just about like what the product is. So like if you're a voice actor and you're doing a bedtime story, like you're not going to be talking fast. Like that was the biggest thing, is like really understand what we're trying to do there. And a brand book was really good at conveying that. So we would be saving a lot of time. That was a big thing. The other big thing was the onboarding process. So like really making people understand what we were doing quickly was really key in that, because we didn't have a lot of time to allocate to like doing that. So kind of fine tuning that onboarding process was super important. Part of that was just at Better Sleep, at least, was just saying to do things slowly. Like that was the biggest thing, is like whatever, however fast you're talking, like do it like
Or
twice as slowly. And when he thinks he's too slow, do it slower. And that was really hard to like kind of get in people's head, but we were getting better and better at doing that. And lastly, I think is like there was kind of with any like freelancer, there's a learning phase, but there's also a point where you have to decide that person is just not working out. And that is, if you're able to do that quickly, you're going to save a lot of time. So like we would, let's say, like work with one person, do like 1 or 2 projects, but we had this rule that by that point we had to like decide if it's someone we're going to work with more or not, and just like not fall into like the sunk cost fallacy and just like cut it short, like, oh, they're not improving fast enough, let's stop working with them. And that was also very important, because at first we would work with someone too long thinking they're going to improve, and at the end like lose a lot of time.
yeah, time is short. So you had some kind of like review process built in, of course.
Yeah, exactly. That was like before AI became a big thing. So I think like nowadays there's probably a lot of things we could do through that, like when it comes to localization. But at that point, it was not really part of the discussion. So yeah, like it was establishing all these processes and kind of like checklist to be able to like define if someone was good quickly, and also like bring them up to speed really quickly. Like even when it comes to like optimizing our emails or like or PDFs, we would send them so they know exactly how to get up to speed.
Yeah, yeah, super. I know. I'm sitting here thinking about like all the ways you can use AI to just automate the evaluation and review and auto generating summaries and feedback and what needs to change. Yes, for sure. I would assume they're on that. Let's talk about where you're at right now, Pok Pok. I know Pok Pok is operates in a very highly regulated space. It's a digital experiences for kids. How does that change your approach to performance marketing and messaging and testing and so on?
Yeah, it has its share of challenges because we are subjected to certain laws that certain apps may not. For instance, like any kids product in the US is has to follow COPPA law, which means that there's certain information you can share. Like we can't use ATT with iOS, so that is against that. We can leverage IDFA, we can't leverage GAID with Google. So that means we have a little bit less of information to relate to app platforms, which creates a certain challenge, but also like it also makes you less reliant on those sorts of things. So I think also it allows you to be more nimble as a marketer, which I think is fun. And anyways, it's a challenge that any apps is facing in one way or another. So like what we do a lot to circumvent that is basically looking at blended metrics more. We've established how did you hear about a survey since I started, and that has been really helpful, to be honest. Like it is not exact, but directionally it's usually pretty good. So like we do these things to kind of like work within those restrictions. There's also certain features on ad platforms that we can't use. But at the end of the day, when I think about UA, it's all about creating really powerful creatives that are going to find your audience and that are going to connect with them. So for that, we don't really have any restrictions. So like we just focus a lot of time on that. And then we kind of like accept all the restrictions we have otherwise. So like we just spend a ton of time just thinking about our user psychology, like what does a parent really care about, what's going to convince them to try our app in this particular time of the year. So like just thinking about these challenges. And for the rest, yeah, looking at really blended metrics, like this is how much we spend, this is how much we're getting back on the short term. Like, does that make sense for us and for a finance department? So that has been how we're thinking about UA. That is impacted by our status of like a kid app. Otherwise, there's also certain sensibilities that we have to think about, like in terms of how we talk to parents. We don't want to come too much from a place of judgment because parents receive a lot of judgment. So like we set those kind of like sandbox when it comes to creating ads, where we want to try a lot of different things. Like we test 100 ads per week. So we want to have like that flexibility. But at the same time, we don't want to try certain things that are either like wrong or just like feels bad or makes parent feel bad because that's not really part of our brand. So we just established like guidelines that our designers have to like play within and our UA manager has to play within. But beyond that, like we leave them a lot of leeway. So basically just establishing some hard rules and then playing within these rules.
Oh, interesting. And do you leverage like any kind of like contextual signals in your campaigns? Because that you can't.
What do you mean by
Well,
contextual signal?
well, I mean, even just like time of day or I mean, if you're targeting parents, I'm just trying to think. There's obviously like a seasonality to kids spending more time on phones and computers and playing games and using apps, like as one example.
Yeah, we're playing a
Plus,
bit
like
with that.
weather data, for example. Hey, it's raining. It's gonna be raining for the next 3 days. For example, let's use that data in our targeting.
We haven't gone that granularly to use weather data. We do look at certain time of day, time of week, because there is a seasonality within the week. Like parents, we see that they're downloading more at night because they're just too busy during the day. So like 8 p.m. and later is usually good and is better for us. So we try to maximize that when it comes to when we distribute our budget. So we do look at that, but no, that's interesting. Weather is something we haven't fully dug onto, but also we look at like certain period of the year is definitely better for us, like the holidays. Back to school is ironically really bad for us because we're dealing with younger kids. So like back to school is actually bad for us.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Another question for you is like, first of all, have you, if like when you've dealt with in your career times where growth is stalling, can you kind of share like, if you have like a 30-day playbook, like what do you do to try to uncover what's going on and turn things around?
Yeah, I can think of like a recent example where it happened, and basically what we did was just like change our playbook a little bit. Just like, okay, what we're doing right now is not really working. So like get everyone in that kind of like be even more experimental and not be able to break things, because anyway we're not moving a lot right now, so like even if we break a few things, it's fine. And then just making the best possible hypotheses on the best next step. So like for me, this is more a UA example, so for me was talking with a lot of colleagues in UA, just like what is working for you right now when it comes to like even a very precise thing like on meta, like what does your campaign look like? What are you optimizing for? Are you doing web to web? What is going on there? And like those conversations have been really helpful, because that's not something you'll read in a blog or something your meta partner is going to bring up to you. So like just talking to a lot of people, looking at data, again, like talking to users, like all these things are still important. And then based on that, prioritizing really aggressively and then experimenting really quickly. And that in that particular case, it got us out of this rut, was like trying like a web funnel. And that was basically, if I look back at it, it was just discussion with other UA people. Because after talking with like 2 or 3 people that were like, oh, it's really working well for us, there's like this pattern recognition. I was like, okay, well, we should prioritize it. But yeah, I think it's just, if you're not moving, just like do different things and do them quick enough, because most likely the first thing you try is not necessarily going to work out.
Yeah. So, and to that point, like, how important is your community of growth marketers and others in a similar role to you?
I would say it's extremely important. Like in my career, it has been probably one of the most important thing, because there's no blueprint. Like things move so fast that whatever you read online, like be it a blog article or something from a conference last year, it's like not up to date anymore. So like things change on a weekly basis. So the only way really you can get up to date information is talking to people who are trying to solve the same problem as you. And even though like in most cases business are different, and even like small business model changes can mean a strategy working or not, at least it really helps you to ideate and fill that roadmap with experiments. That, and also like in terms of really like precise technical setups, that is also very helpful, because like when it comes to UA and even growth, like the devil's in the detail, and sometimes it's really small, like checking 3 boxes on meta can make a big difference. But if you don't know about that, well, you just don't know.
That is so true. I have lived that myself. A few more questions for you. I know we're short on time, but a few more questions, if that's cool. So I understand that you've handled brand repositioning and full rebrands internally without any kind of agency support. Tell me about that. I've lived through that myself, but do you have a playbook? How do you go about doing that, ensuring that you've got like number one, stakeholder alignment, which is like I think the biggest pain point around
Yeah.
that, as well as like ensuring growth KPIs aren't disrupted as you're going through that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So, like, I have done that in a previous company, and in that particular company, there had been twice external like efforts to rebrand, like with 2 different agencies, and both of these project had not come to terms. So, like, then it was my turn to do it, and I thought maybe let's not try with yet another external agency, because there seemed to be like a breakdown somewhere where it doesn't work. So I went to it with a very pragmatic approach, where I was like, okay, like why have the other attempts not work? Like what was the blocker? And let's try to do something that is perhaps more realistic. Like let's do something that's going to evolve the brand but still get stakeholder like approval and move forward, because I think it's better to rebrand in a way that works than just like trying again and failing and losing a lot of money. So from your point, I think stakeholder approval was like the biggest part of it. So I just spent a lot of time like really understanding, like especially when it comes to like the executive level, what was the degree they want to move. Because if at the end of the day you come up with something really great but they're not aligned with that, they're just going to shut it down. So like that was the biggest thing, is just like really understanding how much room I had. And once that was done, was just really trying to move that, like not necessarily go with stakeholder approval every part of the brand, because otherwise you get something really mid, like if everyone like brings in their feedback at every level, in my experience it just gets something very consensual and very beige that is not really going to stand out. So like that was not the point. I had a lot of liberty to come up with something interesting within kind of like the sandbox I had defined with the stakeholders. So that was the goal. And then the other point, because I knew there were people who were very growth focused and very data driven was test stuff a lot. So like, okay, well, we came up with a new logo. Let's test it. We came up with a new like tagline. Let's test it. And all the way at every step kind of proving that it's better than what we had before, because then it was really easy to get approval, because I'm like, this logo is actually like performs better on the app store, so like why shouldn't we move forward? So like again, I think it was understanding what the stakeholders were into and kind of like use working within those boundaries to still do something really cool, still do something that's going to stand out, but most importantly kind of getting things done and making sure that this brand effort was really going to get applied was going to get everywhere, because I didn't want to like have a third failure when it comes to brand and implementing a rebrand.
Okay, a couple more questions. I know we're like a little past time here. I'm just gonna ask, I think, two more of these here. So maybe can you share like a growth experiment you ran that really kind of defied your expectations, one way or another, positive or negative, and what you learned from it?
Yeah, I can think of two that are very similar and that both time kind of floored me because I didn't think they would have this type of impact. And in both cases, it was changing about one sentence of copy in the onboarding. So like no redesign when it comes to visual stuff. It was really just changing one sentence at the beginning of the onboarding. So it was about really dumbing it down, just really telling users what they want to hear at the very first screen they're going to see. So like we did that at Better Sleep, and at first we had something very branded, which was like, we're going to take you on this journey to understand your sleep, blah, blah, blah. And it was like kind of convoluted. And then the next time was something like, will help you sleep better. And just that got like a giant boost in performance. And it was kind of the same thing at Pok Pok. It was just like dumbing it down and just telling people what is their problem and telling them we're going to solve it. And in both cases, it got like 25% like impact in terms of download to paid. And every time like we with the product, people were like, that can't be it. That can't be it. But it was it. I think we often like underestimate how strong copy can be, and also how strong just like understanding your user psychology and just talking to them in a very simple term. Like people come in with an issue, with a problem, like kind of just tell them that you're gonna fix it. I think that can be very impactful, and not like I think in like really clever ways of wording stuff, but sometimes in really like simple ways of wording stuff.
Yeah, that's a great insight actually. Keep it simple, simple, clear, directional, but really kind of keep it simple. Last question for you. This is always an interesting one because in this space, it's like things, as you said earlier. I mean, things are changing all the time, and they will continue changing all the time. But like looking ahead over the next, like try to envision the next 3 to 5 years. So 2028 to 2030, what emerging trends or shifts do you think we will see that'll really fundamentally reshape how growth teams operate? And are you doing anything today to prepare for that?
Yeah, that's a tough question, but I think like what comes to mind is probably what will come to mind for a lot of people. It is AI, because it's moving so fast and it disrupting so many things, and it's kind of hard to tell right now. Is it going to slow down at any point? It doesn't seem like it is. So like when I think about 5 years, that comes like top of mind for me. And I think what we're going to see when it comes to growth, I think it's going to be a lot faster to experiment with a lot of things when we were talking about onboardings or even coming up with new features. So like I feel that might not become as big of a differentiator as it used to be. And same thing with UA when it comes to like creative and stuff like that. I think a lot of challenges that are kind of hard to solve right now, like testing hundreds of creatives a week, are gonna become kind of a commodity in the future. So then what remains as a differentiator? I think like a really strong brand and like really like having something that stands out is going to become even more important. So like how do you stand out? Like I think by having a really interesting positioning, or just like, you know, like having a different approach when it comes to marketing. I think these things are going to remain really important. And also just like creativity and sticking out of the lot, I think are important now. But if all these other things become commodities and executing doesn't become as big of a challenge as it is right now, I think these are going to become even more important. And it's going to be hard to replace, let's say, a strong personality behind a brand, or like even a celebrity behind a brand. Like using like AI to replace that's going to be harder. So like that's where I'm thinking. It's just like finding stuff that is like very hard to duplicate through those means.
That's
Yeah.
a great. That's a dude. I could not agree with you more on that.
AI can help you build one, but like building a community is a moat that does is harder to move. And brand is going to be really big, but just like a lot of time of things we spend a lot of time on, which are more like operational challenges almost. I think they're going to become less of a differentiator. Like there's going to be some kind of AI way to do it, especially creative, even engineering challenges. I think they're going to be easier to execute for smaller team, which there's like a pessimistic way to see that, where there's going to be like a lot of layoffs and stuff like that. But there's also like an optimistic way to see it, is that it's going to be less about operational challenges, and I think a lot more about big ideas like positioning, branding, like should we work with like this like influencer in this space. Like these are perhaps going to be ways to differentiate ourselves from competitor. I think it's going to be exciting.
Yeah, great point. Great point. Cool. Well, listen, I appreciate you joining me today and letting me throw you some questions
It
and
was great talking about all these things today, Dennis.
good stuff.